Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast.
Today's episode, Complex Strengths and Complex Connections with Shelley Farnham and Julia Harris. We talk about Julia navigating school when neurodivergent and feeling that her soul was too loud, the importance of authenticity and being able to be themselves, and what they would choose to eat if they were invited to lunch with the Queen.
Julia, or JuliaArtsJulia, is a neurodivergent ADHD plus mum of two neurodivergent / not so typical sons, an artist, children's entertainer, and also neurodiversity mentor, educator and trainer at Complex Strengths and the Neurodiverse universe. Shelley worked as a teacher in South Africa and then as a teaching assistant and SEN support in the UK. She also has a son who is autistic and ADHD. She started Complex Connections as she is passionate about supporting other parents to focus on understanding, communicating, and so most importantly, on building connection with their neurodivergent child. Julia and Shelley have combined their strengths to create and deliver their fabulous All on Board for Families course, a 5-week group coaching course to support parents of neurodivergent children. The course uses the analogy of the family being the crew on board a ship, moving from the overwhelm and confusion of Struggle Rock towards calm.
So good morning to you, Julia and Shelley. How are you both doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Good, thank you.
Excellent. So if we start with our first question, then we'll go with Julia first. When you were little, did you have any idea what you wanted to be when you grew up?
The first one that I remember, and probably about the same sort of time, I think I wanted to be Jodie Foster. Was probably one of my first things. And I remember my grandfather explained to me that Jodie Foster was an actress. So I kind of was like, oh, yes, I want to do that. The other thing I knew I wanted to be was an artist. So I remember saying I wanted to be an artist. And I think the response to both of those things was, well, when you grow up, you're going to have to get a proper job, kind of conversations that we do with our young people. And the art thing was just the one that never really went away. Even in any form of job that I've done has always involved art and creativity. In the background, I always wanted to be an actress or a singer or something like that. But it was more that I wanted to be Jodie Foster, I think.
Why not?
Yeah, why not? So, the trajectory of that didn't work out too brilliantly. And as far as school was a really huge challenge for me as a neurodivergent young person, which I understand now. It's wonderful to have a language for that. I mean, when I was younger, I'd have just, over the years, I described it as my soul is too loud. What my internal sense and voices and everything was telling me was really quite different to what other people were telling me about reality. So I struggled with all sorts of things from authority and sense of unfairness and all those kind of things. So I kind of hung on in there through the education system till about the age of 12. And the last couple of years in middle school was when, for me, what we say of like the wheels came off, and I had a teacher. So whether that was probably was just due to the age, which usually happens for neurodivergent young people, it really starts to not work. There's the being a good girl, trying to be good. And then you reach a stage where you just feel like either an utter failure, it's going to be impossible for you to do all the things that you're constantly told that you should be doing, that you don't quite know why you're supposed to take responsibility for. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you do feel like you're taking responsibility. You do think you're a good person, and you're getting messages all the time that you're just wrong. And you equate wrong with not being good at that age, you know. So, you know, just I spent most of my time, you know, I was always getting told off for talking. So probably I was off topic. It's quite likely. But generally it started by somebody needing help with something or asking me a question. And I'm, as an adult now still, it's like if I'm trying to concentrate on one thing, but if somebody else needs help, if they talk about their line of thought, my brain can't not problem solve. If I'm given a problem, my brain can't not solve that problem. So until that problem is solved in some degree, even if it's a response that will work on it later, you know, close that loop somehow. If you open a loop for me, it's like a real huge agitation in my body to not close the loop. So yeah, by that age, and that was my form tutor for 2 years at that age, you know, in middle school, how they do that kind of age 11 to 12. And she was the art teacher. So to me, she was this awesome woman that could just instantly sketch this huge sketch on a board. And to me, the way that she communicated was really lovely and fun. But I obviously drove her absolutely nuts. It was yeah, tough moments. So it was by age 12, emotionally, I was really, really struggling. And she also struggled with me. My mother said she's really scared. The teacher's words, in fact, were, Julia puts herself up to be a scapegoat. Like, what child intentionally puts themselves up to be a scapegoat? Do you know what I mean? So by the time I got to secondary school, I was already had made the decision in my head that I wasn't going to try for anybody. I was not willing to try for anybody. So, and again, art was the only thing that I loved doing. And so it was the class that I always saw all the way through. It was the only thing that, you know, I would actively turn up for. And I wrote poetry, so I write as well. So it's just that inescapable creative nature of reality. Everybody else seems very straight and narrow and organized and in a straight line and in a box and in a system. And I felt like this, I was constantly spilling over all my own edges, let alone everybody else's edges. Do you know what I mean? So writing. Writing loads of poetry from that point. And if I wasn't writing, I was drawing. And then I got out of school, like at 16, when you finally do your exams. And in the last year also, they do, you know, the kind of concept of doing work experience. I was ready. I was there. I was already working from age 14 in part-time jobs. And as far as I was concerned, I was looking forward to doing work experience in the last year of school. And that was the year they announced, we're not doing work experience now. We're not doing work release. And that was one, like my youngest is now doing, of like, well, if I don't get what I want, then I'm not even going to be here. Do you know what I mean? Not that I used to go much before 10 o'clock in the morning or anything anyway. But I remember having discussions with the school and saying, no, I've been waiting for, I want this work experience. I need to get out into the workplace. So I had to drop a load of exams and drop down from sort of O-level. I was supposed to take 9 or 11 O-level, something ridiculous like that. And I had to drop them all down to CSEs and things in order to be allowed to go and do the work experience. I think they were trying to get me to back down. And of course, it's like, no, that's what's happening in my head. That's what we're doing. So, and I remember the headmaster, it was a headmaster at the time of the secondary, I was at, saying, you know, why? And it's like, well, I hate all the teachers. I hate all the children. I don't want to be here anymore. I just need to go out to work. And art was the only thing I wanted to do. And I remember ringing back for my results. So I left at 16, past my 16th birthday. The only thing I went in for was my exams. I loved exams. Exams was a wonderful time of year for me. It was getting out of lessons. Do you know what I mean? So for me, every year, whenever they did tests and all the other children were biting their nails, I'd be like, brilliant, we don't have to do classes. It didn't occur to me that an exam was a problem. So it's just like, nobody tells me what to do when I'm in the middle of an exam. I get 2 hours to just write or just think or do. So I loved that. So I went and did my exams, but my art exam, I actually got a D in the O-level because in part of this organising to get out to the work experience, I could only take the lessons for 3-dimensional art. And I was like, very like, well, no, that's what the kids that can't really do art do, but I did the lessons and I wanted to take the 2-dimensional exam. And of course I hadn't done any of the normal 2-dimensional studies. So I only got a D for my actual O-level and that was it. So I was like, okay, maybe I'm not supposed to be an artist then. But then I couldn't escape that all the way through my work. Everything I did within certainly within 2 years of leaving home and leaving school, I had like a cleaning business. One of the first things I did was set up a cleaning business. I did cleaning for a little while. I did hairdressing and I did car valeting, did all these, like, whatever, I'll try anything. And set up my first business was a little cleaning route. And I wanted to have like a funky outfit. So I'd wear black leggings because like all the proper cleaning companies had their uniforms. And I'd decorate the T-shirts. So I'd do like all these sparkly hand-painted designs on my T-shirts. So I'd turn up in these leggings and funky T-shirts. And next thing I knew, the customers were wanting to buy the T-shirts. And then, so I was doing one-off pieces for people for gifts and also doing, more simple designs that they would buy. And then it turned out they were having coffee mornings and swapping and selling designs to each other that I'd done some of the things. So it's like, so then my second business was doing T-shirt painting and creating gifts and things like that. So, and that was in the original recession where all the wheels fell off, like 1987. So going back, it's like 400 years ago. It's like, no. 1987, where like, and I was trading in markets and I was selling all of my stock, and there were market men in tears because like literally they stood there with all their stock. Everything financially was really tough at that time. So those were my first forays into running businesses. It was just that kind of, I need to want to do this. And so I just kind of went with it. But yeah, I didn't do any college or anything till much later. And of course, I loved learning. I've always loved learning. Learn, study research from a kid. The first thing in the morning, I'd be watching Open University programs because that was the only thing that used to be on the TV at like 7 o'clock in the morning was Open University. So, and I've done that all the way through. So that's kind of gradually, so I've always had that entrepreneurial side. And then my other side, I did retail when I was young, up until 20, business and retail, and then started working with adults with learning disabilities and specialised in working. I tended to end up working in residential units and day centres which had the title with challenging behaviours. But mostly because I found communication really easy, that I could understand where people were coming from when they were upset or resistant, so I was able to support that really well. I didn't seem to have the same problems with it as some people. I also had loads to learn. I mean, by no means was I perfect off the bat, dealing with situations. I mean, it's like they say, when somebody loses their temper with a child or something like that, what you hear is the voices that are in the back of their head about what you should be doing. But I fairly rapidly over the years have let go of a lot of those things. And that kind of brings me to where I am now, having tried to go back into work in schools and residential care over the last 3 or 4 years, and having been out of it for 12 years as an entertainer and an artist and coming back in. And I can't believe that, to me, they're further back than they were when I left, like 15 years ago now. So, which was why I put together what we're doing now. And it's how I met Shelley.
Awesome. Awesome. Looking forward to hearing a bit more about that. So thanks, Julia. I could ask you about 1,000 questions, but I'm not going to. Not today. Shelley.
Yeah, so I feel like my story is pretty much the complete opposite of Julia's. I had a very kind of stable sort of school experience, went to school, very conformist, fitted into my classes, did what I had to do, moved around a bit. My dad was transferred. We lived in South Africa, obviously. My dad was transferred around a bit, so had to move schools at a couple of pretty critical times, found that really, really challenging. found it difficult to kind of fit in a new place, find new friends, that sort of thing. But left school, didn't really have any other idea about what I wanted to do other than to become a teacher. I think that had kind of just been assumed. I went into that, did my degree in primary teaching, enjoyed that sort of thing, got a job straight after university, went into teaching, and I think pretty quickly realized that being a classroom teacher was not really what I wanted to do. Just the whole thing of trying to keep 30 children under control and teach them certain things, I found it really, really overwhelming. So very quickly, within a couple of years, decided to set up my own business. I took on a franchise of maths tutoring, enjoyed that a lot more. And it was that kind of one-to-one experience with children that I liked, the small group, getting to know a child, kind of being able to build up their confidence. And maths was always a passion of mine because I really struggled at school with maths, but eventually in university met a tutor. He was my lecturer who made me believe that I could do it. And that was a crucial element of me wanting to pass that on to other children, kind of helping them to believe in themselves and see that they could do it. And of course, as soon as I believed in myself, I did a whole lot better than I'd ever done before. So it was very much a case of that. We then got married, moved to the UK, didn't want anything to do with education whatsoever. So did a lot of different admin jobs and had 2 children, and then eventually decided that I did want to go back into education, but decided against transferring my degree and becoming a classroom teacher. So I got a job as a teaching assistant, and that was fabulous because it allowed me that small group work, getting to know the children on more of an individual level, helping them as I went. And that's pretty much where I've been for the last 11 years. I've just recently left that, but thoroughly enjoyed it. It's the strange thing is that all that way, becoming a teacher, training to be a teacher, being a teaching assistant, really didn't prepare me for understanding neurodiversity. And I think of all the children I had in my class, all the children that I've worked with over the years, where if I'd had a better understanding much earlier on, I could have definitely been so much more of a support for them and helped them out so much more. But anyway, there's no point in looking back. You know what you know at the time. You do the best you can at the time. And then kind of had my son, who's now 16. And when he was about 6 or 7, we began to realize that there were certain things he was struggling with school, not academically, socially, and behavior and that sort of thing. Kept getting the message from teachers that if he could just focus a little bit more, he'd do so much better. And we, of course, being traditional kind of parents, were like, come on, you've got to focus. We promised rewards and treats if we didn't hear that at parents' evening. And looking back now, you know, this poor kid, he was doing the best that he could. And very quickly, we had to learn that there was something else going on here. So he eventually, to cut a long story short, eventually got diagnosed as ADHD at age 11. And that really, well, before then, even as we were trying to better understand him, that set me on my learning journey. Very quickly found out that I would have to do a lot of the research and investigation myself because there wasn't a lot of professional support available, not a lot of information out there. Thankfully, that's getting better now. And yeah, so went on a very, very long, steep learning curve, realized how much better we could help children within schools, within education. The more I learned about my son, the more I could apply that to my job. Just the more I felt that I learned about life in general, I felt like my view had been so narrow before. So yeah, it was a fabulous learning journey. I wouldn't change it for the world. And it's definitely developed into a passion of mine, kind of wanting to, it came out of seeing how little support there was for me as a parent and for my son. I was desperate just to form a community, find other people who were experiencing the same kind of thing. So decided to set up the business, and along the way, that's when I met Julia.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So is it, this exploration into the world of neurodiversity, when I know I talk about sort of the stereotypes that we grew up with, that we didn't really know what it was and how to cure it, and all of that sort of stuff. You know, Dustin Hoffman has a lot to answer for, bless him. And yeah, so I feel like it's now, I don't know whether it's because of my experience personally and with our little boy and meeting and working with both these two, but I am seeing almost a tsunami of awareness into neurodiversity coming across the sort of the business world, but not so much the education world, unsurprisingly. Yes. So how did you both meet?
Well, I having had the kind of I've independently studied all sorts of things in order to tackle some of these, to keep meeting. For me, it's a kind of healing modality. I'm a bridge builder. So wherever we are now to where we want to go, or to bridge build the relationships between people within, partnership relationships or parent to child relationships, with help my young people, my own children, from where they really honor who they are and where they are, but also help them access the other things that they want to be part of and things like that. So, and I've studied all sorts of things over the years in trying to understand people as well. From a really young age, I was trying to understand people. So this is where I think the autistic traits come up on my assessments. But actually, in my studies, I've very much found that there is what is deemed one of the genetic types linked with ADHD also has the same social misunderstanding of cues and things that autism does anyway, because of course all of these things, especially ADHD, OCD and autism, have a huge amount of overlap genetically and in some brain formation differences, things like that. So I'd been studying since childhood, like I said, open university programs, and my mum had used to be like, I think somebody at her work or something gave her, knowing she had children, gave her this huge stack of like medical type magazines that had been one of those each month. So we're talking back in the 70s, late 70s. So I had everything from herbal law to psychology and medical things and treatment. So it's this holistic kind of magazine, and reading all of the psychological stuff for that really with great interest. But I also, as a teenager, I tried to understand everything from an astrological point of view. So I've also studied, yoga and healing modalities and shamanism and views on reality, because the simple fact is my experience of reality is different to the way mainstream education and general conversation would have us believe. Sensorial differences, synesthesia and things like that mean that your experience of reality is just not what people say reality is. So, and then it's understanding, of course, now we begin to understand how the brain forms reality from the way it processes that information, and how our internal subjective reality is actually a very individual experience. But if you have two neurotypical people, their experiences are more likely to overlap in big ways. Whereas if you're neurodivergent, even though there is some overlap, there's still very, very individual experiences of reality. So I'd kind of had so many studies and all of these different things, but when I wanted to help people, I was working in a school for a while, and after twice being told, well, that's just your opinion, I thought, right, well, okay, if I'm going to try and help people, and I did that usual one of those gremlins starting off a business, not imposter syndrome, but feeling not qualified, not understanding that my experience, as well as, my personal experience, my subjective experience of my neurodivergent reality, let alone the 30 years experience I have of working and raising neurodivergent young people and things like that, qualifies me? Do you know what I mean? And it's that, but one of the things I remember from childhood, the message was, I'm blessed with all love to my mum and my family. One of the throwaway lines was, what are you? You're useless. And they'd actually make me repeat it. And of course, it wasn't meant harshly. It was like when I was forgetting things, when I was dropping things, I was cack-handed. And, you know, they'd say things in a loving tone. It was never a really harsh, put-down tone. But it was still the message. So I had this big thing about being useless. And I've just recently had this thing of like, you can't get more full of use than a human being, let alone a human being with diverse experiences, let alone a human being that spent the last 50 years of their life reading stuff in order to try and understand other people, but wanted to feel like I was qualified. So Shelley and I ended up on the same American course from Impact ADHD called Sanity School, because when I looked through their things, that made a sense of, oh yeah, they're talking about the same things that I'm talking about. If I do this course, I could maybe bring this into the UK and teach this in schools and things like that. And how, as I was going through the course, there was a lot of, it's quite a basic, which is I very much respect. It's aimed at helping, is that meeting people where they are. So whereas my brain and all of my research means that I'm already deep into the brain and the neurochemistry and the looking for expressions of neurodivergent experiences and things like that. So Shelley and I met on that course and we supported each other through a lot of the kind of nerve-wracking moments of, oh, we've got to do like an hour video for our accreditation and things like that, which is just like, you know, so, and once we started talking kind of once a week, that was it. and Shelley went ahead and did the Sanity School, but I already knew it wasn't at the depth or the places or what I wanted to look at. I greatly appreciated everything I learned from, not that I learned that much, but like the way of the module of putting it together, their approach of supporting. I think they're brilliant at training practitioners and bringing in and talking to families that don't want to really know what's going on underneath, but they do want a skill set to understand that there's differences that you can scaffold for, and that's a better way of dealing with things, which I think is brilliant. But I really wanted to know what's going on underneath that. And because for me, that helps me make adjustments personally, because then that's just the way I work. So which is why I came up with Complex Strengths and the Neurodiverse Universe, just wanting to talk to everybody. To me, none of it is deficit. I've said in a video the other day, the only deficit I think neurodivergent people have when it comes to fitting into the systems of society is that we are less able to be less human. So we are a bit more, you know, that society is not about supporting all of the human foibles. It's about taking those and making them fit into a more conglomeration and workers within a certain structure, which is all very important. But of course, you need the wild beans on the edges for creativity and for science and a bit of defiance of the system. And that's how systems grow and change. There's those bits at the edges, and I think that's kind of what we are. So yeah, so Sanity School is where I met Shelley, and lots of conversations later. Yeah, we're still linked together because luckily Shelley likes the things that I say.
And I did love Sanity School and I loved delivering it and I still like the program, but Julia's findings just go so much deeper, and it just explained more to me about the actual brain and our nervous system and polyvagal theory and all that kind of thing, which to me just provided a much deeper understanding for myself. I would kind of sit there when she was teaching me the stuff and go, oh my goodness, now I better understand that. And it was just a revelation to me. And I found that when I was able to explain that to Daniel, it because he was a teenager by then, I suppose, it helped him to better understand it as well, not to see himself as broken, but to see himself as just having a different thinking brain. And that's the value that I see in Julia's work, is that it can give them practical strategies, because that's what you want. Literally, as a parent, you want to know, what can I do? But it also, because you're learning what's going on behind the scenes, what's happening in the brain, it gives you that much better understanding. So in doing that, you change your whole perspective, the way you respond, which then means your child responds differently, which just sets off a brilliant chain reaction. And I'm very much all about connection. It's that, to me, is just the absolute central thing. If we can connect with our children on that level, and we can kind of come at them and say, okay, let's work together, let's connect together, the relationship is the most important thing. That just, yes, there's still going to be challenges, yes, there's still going to be difficulties, but if you've got that connection, anything is possible within that, and you can then begin to support your child more effectively. And really importantly, like Julia said, to highlight their strengths and see their talents, and kind of build their confidence and self-esteem as well.
And I think that being able to really truly witness, being able to say to them, maybe this is what's going on inside you. I've had this conversation with one of the young people in my family this weekend, and said, okay, I see from the outside you look a little bit like X. Underneath that could be da 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 da, and what the data is, and watch the little light go on in the head, go, yes, that's what it's like for me. So understanding, getting to that lower level of understanding, helps that connection, because they suddenly feel witnessed and they suddenly feel understood in a way that they couldn't put into words before. I think it's really important.
Yeah. So we did sanity school, didn't we, during lockdown, which was with Shelley, and that was almost sort of life-changing in terms of our relationships and connections with my little boy. Not little anymore, he's almost as tall as I am. And because I think it's that power over parents. That's how we're brought up. You do what you're told. This is how you do it. Be obedient, follow the rules. And I think I was very much like Shelley in my approach. So I got told off for talking a lot and moved around. I wasn't ever allowed to sit next to my friends, but then I would just make friends with the people I was sitting around and talk at them at school. And if you could concentrate, and the emotional maturity thing, I got that a lot. I was very immature, apparently, and I just didn't want to bring my little boy up in that power over way. I wanted, but all of society, everything you read is like, you just must get your child to obey and go to bed and stop being a Klingon. And
it's so difficult to go against that, isn't it? It's so difficult to think differently, because you feel so judged as a parent. It's really being able to, when you understand things better, you can get beyond that. You can kind of go, that's their opinion, that's what they think.
So having the actual information that's what I want for the young people, as well as parents, and teachers the language. When we begin to understand that it's individual brains you're dealing with, what you're dealing is individual neurologies and individual brains. People seem to not be able to move past. Individual people are allowed to be different to each other, just on the grounds of you're just entitled to be a different person and you shouldn't have to fit into a box in the first place. But if you sidestep, it's not about, if you sidestep these kind of what I call the outdated truisms and received wisdoms of, if you are what I would class as an efficient, you want to be efficient and you don't want to jump through somebody else's hoops, and you're going to do it the minimal way possible, that means you're lazy. Do you know what I mean? It's like, no, if people can't move past these personality defects without starting to regard us all as, we're just individual brains and neurologies, and that's how they're designed to function. We can evidence it, they can test it, we can see how it's working now, and then perhaps that will give everybody a bit of a break. I was saying before we started about forgiveness being big on my list, is because I already knew I was, and that's why I fell in with in theory, the wrong crowd, because they weren't the wrong crowd. I could see them all as these human beings that were struggling in different ways. And I had utter respect for the way that they were trying to muddle through in their life. But I think the science will help other people make that switch as well, to stop putting all of those restrictions on everybody.
Yeah. I remember coming off one of the all on board course that I did as well, because I just had this image of me as a child just being friends with everybody. I just you guys had told us about how the neurodivergent kids generally tend to you've got all the stereotypical, the bright ones, the sporty ones, the popular ones, and then the sort of the weirdos at the edge, just to you can't really sort of join them up. And I was like, oh, I just thought I was fairly popular and friends with everybody. But no, I was just one of the weirdos who was just trying to get away from.
There is that, those moments of realization of actually, I know I talked a lot to people, and I went up to people and I smiled a lot at people, and I really liked them. And that's funny, because that's what you say about the and I say inverted commas, accusation, the label of emotional immaturity. So by emotional immaturity, you mean non-cynical, innocent, open, forthright, trusting, honest. So all these things that actually enable you to truly engage and connect with other human beings, that other people that get into these much more social, the masking. So people talk about autistic people masking, and it used to really upset me. Every time I heard it, I'd literally overwhelming grief would come up for me, because the thing I couldn't do was actively mask. So that's how I really perceive myself as being more ADHD. My assessment is moderate ADHD, and I say I'm neurodivergent, and my strongest presentation is ADHD, because that sort of thing, I didn't have the working memory, or something in me. I had too much defiance. I was already that oppositional right from when I was really little. So the non-compliance button, to me, masking is compliance. So, and I couldn't mask, which meant I couldn't fit in. So I couldn't gain the friends that other people seem to be able to gain by knowing how to, and people will say, play the game, that they're pretending, and that, all these kind of things. So neurotypical do the masking, but for neurodivergent people, some people, and I recently learned the terms to split it into active masking and passive masking. So ADHDers, I'm very aware that I passively mask. There are lots of things that you can't say that, Julia, you can't do that, Julia, and that I'll squash down. I haven't sworn all the way so far yet through this meeting, or, I can't boss everybody, or I can't decide, be creative with every other human being in the space around. So as a child, it would be like, let's play a game. And of course, I thought of everybody's roles for them and where everybody else should go and all of that kind of stuff. I can't organize myself for toffee, but I'd creatively think of everything for everybody and want it to play out and all those kind of things. So that meant I was bossy. So I learned to tone down. But I could never do the put on something that didn't come from inside me. Whereas a lot of people talk about they actually managed to copy and mimic, and they would be doing and being in order to be accepted. So whereas that bit I just was not capable of. So to me, that emotional immaturity, I think, is that process of it's like just being honest, just turning up, being fully yourself is somehow immature. It's like having fun, having energy. It's like,
almost just not having learned those kind of societal norms that you're expected to use.
And the lack of inhibition, that's it. When that was Dr. Russell Barkley, I don't agree with everything he says. And I have to, whenever I'm listening to him, the first 15 minutes, I'm furiously mad and very non-compliant and very angry with everything he's saying, strangely enough. But once I get through that, to hear the data of the things that he wants to talk about, one of his things of that kind of thing, that sort of 5, 6, 7, where other children are developing inhibition, that doesn't happen for an ADHD person. I was like, oh, that would make a lot of sense. That concept of everybody else does kind of want to be like this, but somehow they know not to because it's something holds them back. And it's just like, nah. Yeah.
No, it's the masking thing is really interesting. And I think as you learn this stuff growing up, you just thought you were rubbish. I'm going to swear for you. So I just thought it was a bit shit.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And you kind of, when you sort of figure out what it is and then learn more about it, you have to go through a bit of a grief period and self-forgiveness and forgiveness of those who have unintentionally harmed you, because none of us knew what could help. But it's just, there's some teeny tiny little tweaks that can be made, and they're not massive, but they can help so much. And trying to get those teeny tiny tweaks in parents and in schools and in workplaces. We're not asking for a lot, are we? No,
we're not asking for a lot, but this is where my inhibition goes out the window, because my immediate response is, there's only a tiny tweak, like get off your high horse and show a bit of humility. And so there is, and I totally don't actually feel that the rage in me, do you know what I mean, from that childhood range of all of the things that, and I know that every parent is struggling and trying to do the best they can. I know that actually every teacher is struggling and trying to do the best they can. So as an adult, I do have compassion for and understanding, which is why I produce the things that I do and the way that I do. And I hold the space, the way for, hopefully for other people in the group, for everybody attending, in a way that I hope they will then feel enabled to go and hold space for other people. Whereas actually, as soon as you're talking, my immediate response is, yes, get a fucking high horse. And so it's quite an angry reaction, but I hope that's the inhibition thing. It's probably good for lots of reasons, really.
No,
I think as well, if we can get this information to our young people, I think it's going to help them to become so much more self-aware. And I think in the whole mental health crisis, often that self-awareness is what's lacking, and that feeling of I'm not good enough, I'm broken, there's something wrong with me, I'm the one that's wrong. Whereas if we can get this awareness out, then that has to help those young people. Those young people are then going to grow up into adults who are that much more self-aware and are much more compassionate with themselves as well as with other people. And then they'll have children and they will be able to show that awareness and that compassion for those children. And even, talk about getting it out to adults. I think the parents can benefit from it. It's helped me hugely learning about things like social contagion and masking and all that kind of thing in helping myself to deal with certain issues of my own mental health. So it's that self-awareness that it kind of helps you to grow as a person, and it helps you to almost heal yourself as well as being able to then pass that on to the children.
Yeah, it's definitely healing from both sides, I think, as well. And it's because it helps us also listen to children, and there's a lot that when they're sharing and we can recognize in ourselves and that process, it's always about building bridges. And wherever you're building bridges between your mind and your body, between yourself and your inner child, between yourself and your actual child, all of that bridge building is healing every single step of the way. When we were talking a moment ago, I was very aware that I think I count myself as very lucky. My one was Pink Floyd, Another Brick in the Wall, came out when I was about 10. So I already had that sort of, there was like, there are adults out there that feel like I do as a child. Do you know what I mean? So I think anything that can sort of bridge that there are adults that understand and feel the same and are able to talk to me. And, that's always such a powerful thing, that mentorship of what is the inner child's experience and finding an adult to be able to communicate with whenever they're struggling. Yeah, very much.
Yeah, we do a lot of talking about, all of these famous people suspected or have come out as neurodiverse as well. So we're doing a lot of watching and learning about what Disney at the moment, and how, people thought he was bonkers.
Yeah.
And it turns out he was an absolute bloody genius, and recognizing that it does take sparks of brilliance. There's not a lot between genius and madness, is there?
Absolutely. Walt Disney, I used that in a mental health course that I did with some children at school, and I pointed out that we were talking about resilience, and Walt Disney was fired from his first job for not being creative and imaginative enough. And then he showed them.
Yeah. You like those then he showed them stories, don't you?
Yeah. Big two fingers up to previous employers. I'll show you.
Yeah. It's you like the Jim Carrey stuff, don't you?
Which one's that?
About how he wasn't told he was going to be anything, and then, am I talking nonsense?
I don't know. Well, he's an interesting character, Jim Carrey.
Mm.
He's got some I know he's often seen as silly characters, but I've watched quite a lot of different videos or interviews with him, and he's got some very deep reflections on they're all characters to help other people free themselves from misery.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to do a bit more reading into him, but there's definitely a creative genius element to him.
Yeah.
He's now very self-aware. He's always about reaching the point of, you talked about self-awareness. We all need to realize that reaching a level of fortune and fame is not where happiness comes from. It's being who you are and embracing that and showing the world who you are authentically rather than some projection of something else. Really quite insightful.
The thing is, it's like, and I feel like I'm on the flip side of that, because there's also, and which is why I've really loved listening to some of the podcasts that you guys have done and some of the people talking, because I'm somebody like, I'm inescapably me. When I got the ADHD, moderate ADHD assessment, I was just immediately, well, if that's ADHD, who's Julia? Do you know what I mean? Because it's like everybody knows who Julia is and the way Julia is, and that's just Julia. Do you know what I mean? That would be the kind of sentences. And it's like, so I've been inescapably myself in so many ways, but that somehow up till this point stands between me and fortune and fame. Not that I'm particularly looking for fortune and fame, but there's also that degree of actually being able to I can construct and do good things for other people, but being able to, I have an older son and a young teenage son who is the second child growing up in a household that's not, and he'll say, oh, not about being poor, but it is that there are plenty of things that he doesn't get the chance to do that the other kids are getting to do, because as a lone parent and with those financial challenges, so wanting to try and also get to a stage where it's supporting myself and becoming financially successful, that's a really weird one for me. So it's quite interesting as Shelley and I go and support each other and support each other's businesses moving forwards. I worry that even because I don't know how to do that, I don't know how to do the fame and fortune bit, I worry that it will hold back the message that I'm trying to get to the schools. I worry that it's going to Complex Strengths, the Neurodiverse universe I've worked on for like nearly 2 years now. There's an amazing range of resources, amazing course. There's a whole website, there's 2 websites, there's affiliate systems, there's all sorts of things in there in place. And I am scared it will die on its feet before it reaches everybody, because I'm not very good at doing that being, fame and fortune thing. So it's an interesting flip. There's 2 sides of that coin,
Absolutely. So what is the plan for future? So Julia needs fame and fortune. So hopefully this podcast will help a little bit, teeny tiny bit. Shelley, what is the cunning plan for the pair of you?
Yeah, well, definitely to keep getting Julia's course out there, definitely to keep facilitating groups where people can learn more, keep getting the course promoted and get more and more people involved with that. I'd like to work one-to-one with people more as well. I think for some people, a group is fabulous, and I'm very much for that sort of sense of community. And I think for other people, they just need a little bit more kind of one-to-one individual help. So I'd really like to do that. And I think Julia wants to do the same kind of thing as well. We've both seen a need for that. And just keep getting the word about neurodiversity out, and keep kind of normalizing it, get into schools, promote the materials, get the children on board, get their parents on board, get the teachers, just bit by bit, able to just kind of change people's perspectives and give them that awareness, which will hopefully lead to much more acceptance of people as individuals, and just help children to grow up accepting themselves, parents to kind of show more compassion for their children and for themselves, and society in general just to become more accepting. And I know that sounds like such a cliche and such a kind of pie in the sky kind of thing, but I think it's absolutely possible. And it's like you talked about, it's those little things that just need to change bit by bit. If we can change people's understanding and change people's perspective, then I think bit by bit it will filter through.
It's just such a tiny shift it's about leverage, isn't it? If you shift just a tiny bit really right at the right point, then it can have a huge impact. So it's not that I'm not very patient for the little bit change. Of course, I'm in there wanting to smash things and change things immediately, fully, which was why I thought I'll go for the children rather than, I don't want it to filter down through. The kids are the ones that need to know it. That's the ones I've designed the games and the things for, So it's like, put it straight in their hands. They're the ones that need the power, have, and should be honoured in that way, power with rather than power over. And neurodivergence positivity, it's not acceptance, it's just absolutely let's get positive about this and start understanding it, and let's smash down some of these old outdated truisms and receive wisdom. So I'm there with my big boots on.
Excellent. So we're here fanning the flames.
Fan the flames.
So we're gonna move on to we're gonna ask maybe one quick fire, and then we'll go to the question we ask everybody.
Okay.
So you are invited to Buckingham Palace for afternoon tea with Her Majesty the Queen. The catering team gets in touch. What do you choose as your sandwich? Anything is possible.
Oh.
Well, the thing is, like, I don't normally eat bread, but you can't do the Queen without having the cucumber sandwiches. Surely that's the whole. You need the whole experience.
Not just plain cucumber, though. It has to be cheese and cucumber for me.
Ooh.
That's hilarious. Yeah, don't put any cucumber anywhere near anything I'm eating. Oh, actually, tsatsuki's nice. Oh, Pims and tzatziki. That's it.
Yeah. No, I must admit, I'm not a big eater of cucumber, but if I was going to sit down with the Queen, I think I'd have to do that. It's white with crustless cucumber, a little bit of lemon, something like that. I don't know.
Do you like the scone as well? Does the Queen?
Oh, scones.
Yes, that would be a good one. As long as it's a cheese scone.
It keeps going around on Facebook. Do you put the cream first or the jam first? The cream first, the jam first. I bet the butter goes first.
Yeah.
Butter and jam
and cream.
Yeah.
High five, Julia.
Yeah.
I'm sure I read that the Queen has scones every day.
Oh, really?
Freshly made every morning.
Freshly made.
That does sound nice, but and I just had 3 scones at my mum's house because she makes high protein ones because she knows what I'm like. So I have to have high protein. I can't do the carb thing very much at the moment, so I had high protein scones.
Oh, that sounds amazing. We've got to Google that. Okie dokie. So, Shelley, I know we've asked this question before in a previous podcast, but I'm going to ask you again. If you could go back to 18-year-old Shelley, what advice would you give to you?
I think my advice at this point now would probably be just be your authentic self, play bigger, be braver, accept who you are and go for it. Do what you want to do.
Awesome. And you, Julia, same question.
Yeah, I think it's a similar thing. My 18-year-old self, I would love to whisper to my 18-year-old self that how they perceive reality is absolutely trustworthy, and as beautiful and incandescent as that is also equally real. And to have the courage of just living in that, being that, and expressing that, and not worry about toning it down for everybody.
So for our listeners, if you'd like to follow a bit more about what Julia and Shelley are up to, find Julia best places on Facebook. Look for the group Complex Strengths, and Shelley's Facebook group is Complex Connections, and connection rather than a C and a T is spelt with an X in the middle.
And all of them will be on the show notes.
The show notes, yes.
Well, thank you ever so much. It feels like it's just gone too quickly and I want to talk to you more. Thank you ever so much for coming to talk to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been fabulous.
It has. It's been a lovely, not quite as train wrecky as it could have been. And it's been absolutely amazing to take part in it. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway and tell everybody.